All right, we talked in the previous video about how you can use a definition of a consumption function, which relates disposable income to consumption, along with the definition of aggregate demand, to derive a simple equation that relates aggregate demand to increases in national income, which increases, so aggregate demand increases by this marginal propensity to consume by this amount B. And again, in that previous video, we also related or determined what this intercept E equal to, which was A, which is from the consumption function, plus investment, plus government spending, minus B, the marginal propensity to consume, multiplied times the tax burden. And we've got this aggregate demand function as a simple line. Now I want to talk about how we would depict the aggregate supply equal to aggregate demand curve equilibrium condition. So in the end, we're going to want aggregate supply to equal to aggregate demand. And now how do we show that over here on this graph? Well, aggregate supply is really another way of writing Y. Okay, that's the value of economic activities equal to Y. So we're looking at where aggregate demand equal to aggregate supply, which if we look at this on this graph, it's that dotted line. That's where aggregate demand equal to aggregate supply. Why 45-degree line? That's the where what's on this part of the graph is equal to that part of the graph. Okay, a 45-degree line is where this and that are equal. Okay, so this is the equilibrium level of national income, and this is where aggregate demand equal to aggregate supply, given the values of E and B. That's a depiction of where the economy is at rest. Okay? Now, this is an important relationship when we start talking about how fiscal policy can change the level of economic activity. So in the previous video, we talked about how an increase in government spending or a decrease in taxes, either one, will increase the intercept. Okay? So again, if you need to review that, please do. An increase in government spending or a decrease in taxes will shift this curve up. Just a simple shift. And what we will see is that we can increase aggregate demand and aggregate supply by this amount if we increase the aggregate demand through these fiscal policies. So let's back up for a second. Let's say that this level of income, Y star, was one that was associated with a recession, where the level of national income was stuck, if you will, at a level that had lots of unemployment. So there were people that were trying to get jobs, couldn't find it because there was insufficient aggregate demand to get the economy going again. This analysis for short-run aggregate demand policies is an argument for increasing government spending or reducing taxes to increase the amount of economic activity. So this is at the core of an activist macroeconomic fiscal policy. Increase aggregate demand, increase output, get the economy moving again. And how much the aggregate demand will increase national income is very much tied to this marginal propensity to consume. If the marginal propensity to consume is greater, so that the slope is bigger, it's a steeper slope, then a given level of increase in government spending will result in an increase, an even greater increase in the amount of economic activity. If you prime the pump, it's called, if you increase government spending or decrease taxes, you can encourage greater economic activity. So here in a short video is the basic depiction of the effect of aggregate demand policies, fiscal policies in this case, on the level of economic activity. Now, a little bit of a caveat. We have not talked in this about the impact on interest rates, on long-term debt, all sorts of economic consequences which are not depicted here. This is just a very straightforward increase in government spending or decrease in taxes on aggregate demand. There are lots of other things that happen in understanding the full consequences of this, but that's the subject of a different video.